David.
I think I'm not sure where we're supposed to sit. Hold on. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to call the following individuals to the pulpit. The President of Jewish Survivors of Latvia, Mr. David Silberman. Executive Vice President of JSL, Professor George Schwab. Cantor Joseph Malavani. Guest speaker, Mr. Ilya Olensky. Dr. Charles Springfield. Board member, Mr. Simon Gezinterman. Board member, Ms. Anita Pittengoff-Nehausen. Latvia's ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Andres Bildagovich. I'd also like to recognize the Secretary of the Board of Jewish Survivors of Latvia, Dr. Ivar Brode, who is out there with you making the trains run on time. But thank you to Ivar. My name is Mitchell Weaver, and on behalf of the Jewish Survivors of Latvia, I welcome each of you to our 81st memorial service. In the chain of memory, each of us is a link. I was told about the emptying of the Riga ghetto on November 30th, 1941, by survivors, including Margaret Vestermanis. Adjoining the Riga ghetto was a Jewish cemetery. That evening, Jews collected the remains of about 800 souls left on the ghetto streets, took them to the cemetery, and buried them in the frozen ground. They recited the Kaddish. After the war, the founders of Jewish Survivors of Latvia, USA, began these annual gatherings to remember the murder. You and I, each of us, are links in the chain of memory that began 81 years ago. We remember. We light 6 candles in memory of the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children brutally murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. Please rise. I would like to call upon the following individuals to come forward to light candles. Ilana Miranda and Jacqueline Rosa, granddaughters of David Silberman, and Joshua, great-grandson of David Silberman. Eleonora, Michael, and Noah, grandchildren of George Schwab. Eva Phillips and Aviva Solared, granddaughters of Yizkor. Bez Nehausen, grandson of Elita Fittingoff Nehausen, who will soon be having his bar mitzvah. Joshua Rackman, grandson of our beloved Luba Rackman. Anna Rishik, granddaughter of our beloved Gerta Fagan. To express our solidarity with the State of Israel and to commemorate our brothers and sisters who sacrificed and who continue to sacrifice their lives in defense of the State of Israel, and to all the victims of terror, including our fellow Jews, I now call upon Lawrence Krugback, a member of Friends of the Israel Defense Forces and grandson of Simon Gesundterman, to light an additional seventh candle. You can be seated. We're now going to organize a little photo opportunity of everybody who lit the candles. So we appreciate your patience for a moment while this is preserved for future generations.
What we're gonna do? Yeah. No, let the boys squad. The girls just a minute, let me see. Tighter. I should see everybody.
We're good. I can see.
Okay. Everybody look at us, that I could see every face. Oh, I don't see one face.
You can go to the front if you want.
Yeah, change Victor.
All right, everyone, look here.
No, it's okay.
Here. Here. Okay, we're good.
Thank you, guys.
One more. Of course. This way.
Thank you. Perhaps in 50 years they can show this photo to their grandchildren. Cantor Joseph Malabani is an Israeli-born American tenor soloist and world-famous cantor, serving as cousin of New York's Fifth Avenue Synagogue and a distinguished professor of liturgical music at Philip and Sarah Bell School of Jewish Music, Yeshiva University. Congratulations to Cantor Malabani on being honored for 50 years of service to the Fifth Avenue Synagogue community. Cantor Malabani possesses a brilliant spinto tenor voice described by the London Guardian as a most powerful, beautiful, and expressive spinto technique, sturdy and heroic. Cantor Malabani began his career as a cantor at Tel Aviv's Bilu Synagogue and in the Israeli army before stints at congregations in Johannesburg and London. Cantor Malavani has toured extensively, teaching and giving concerts. Since helping found the institution in 1989, Cantor Malavani has been the Dean of the Joint Distribution Committee's Moscow Academy of Jewish Music. Cantor Malavani's concerts have been attended by presidents and prime ministers, and he was appointed chief cantor of both Vilnius and Riga. In 1997, the Joseph Malavani Chair for Advanced Studies in Jewish Liturgical Music was established by New York's Yeshiva University at its Bell School of Jewish Music. He is also rector of the Institute of Traditional Religious Jewish Liturgical Music in Leipzig, Germany. Cantor Malavani has kindly shared his world-renowned talents at this annual memorial over many, many years. Cantor Malavani, in memory of the 6 million, will now chant the El Moreh Rachamim. I ask you to please rise, and I'm honored and grateful to introduce Cantor Malavani.
Thank you very much. So this is the traditional prayer, memorial prayer for the Holocaust, for the 6 million, of course, which included the Jews of Latvia.
הצוררים, הגרמנים, הנאצים
You may be seated. David Silverman was born in Prague, Latvia in 1934. In June 1941, one day before the Germans occupied his hometown, he and his family fled to eastern Russia, staying until war's end. Upon returning, he completed Prague Russian High School and entered the Tallinn Polytechnic Institute, graduating in 1957. 1 year later, he moved to Riga and began collecting and recording eyewitness accounts of Jewish experiences under Nazi occupation. He was among Jewish dissidents who fought the Soviets' anti-Semitic policies, and for Jews to be able to emigrate to Israel. He was finally able to leave for Israel in 1971. David Silverman is the author of numerous essential books and articles based on the testimonies of Holocaust survivors. These include books written with or about survivor Frida Mikkelsen, survivor El Nadaye, and rescuer Zionis Lipke. David Silverman initiated and funded the Memorial to Holocaust Victims in his native Prague. David has been an active member of the Jewish Survivors of Latvia since its formal establishment and has attended many of its worldwide reunions of Latvian Jewry. In 2019, David was awarded Latvia's highest honor, Order of the Three Stars, in recognition of his work on behalf of Latvian Jewry. David lives in New York, a retired retired licensed engineering consultant. He is active republishing his Holocaust books in new editions and languages, and in overseeing the day-to-day activities of the Jewish Survivors of Latvia. It is my privilege to now call upon our organization's esteemed president, David Silverman.
Fellow Holocaust survivors, members of the Jewish Survivors of Latvia, USA, honored guest speaker Ilya Ariansky, honored Latvia ambassadors to United Nations, Mr. Andrei Primovic, Captain Joseph Malavani, honored guests. On behalf of the board of the Jewish Survivors of Latvia, the USA, it is my privilege and honor to welcome to you to our traditional annual gathering to commemorate the tragedy that befell the Jews of Latvia and Europe under Nazi occupation. Our organization arose from our tragic past. It has been continuously active meeting the needs of the times in each decade. Today we continue to be active and meet the needs of the times and to look for the future. This year is the 85th anniversary of the start of World War II in 1939 and the 77th anniversary of its end in 1945. Today is especially important to understand and comprehend the tragic lesson of the history. In the 1930s, democratic European nations and America could not stop two predators greedy for world dominance, Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Soviet Union. They initially were allies and in 1939 divided Europe between themselves in the secret criminal addition to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Besides capturing territory for the so-called Lebensraum, living space, the Nazis openly proclaimed that their ultimate aim was to annihilate Europe's Jewish population. To Western democracies, this plan seemed monstrous, unthinkable, and unfeasible, and so they remained indifferent, even indulgent of the Nazi Goebbels' venomous anti-Semitic propaganda based on Hitler's Mein Kampf, successfully breed a generation of hardened fanatics. They formed a machine-like army of killers of the defenseless Jewish population in Germany, Austria, and Nazi-occupied countries and territories. This is how the Holocaust occurred. The post-war Nuremberg Tribunal of leading Nazi war criminals in 1946 cannot can be considered a very conditional justice for Holocaust crimes. The mass murder of Jews from infants to the elderly. Here is why. Among the presiding judges were representatives of Stalin's USSR, which was equally guilty with Hitler for unleashing the Second World War. The other three countries sponsoring the first Nuremberg trial, England, the USA, and France, were guilty in indifferent tolerance, and in case of France, cooperation with the Nazis in Holocaust crimes. All of this is a history lesson which we are obliged to consider as we plan further activities. Today I would like not to only bring to your attention to work performed during the past year, I will also touch on the totality of our activities since establishing our organization decades ago. Additionally, I will formulate our plans and tasks going forward. The Jewish Survivors of Latvia, USA was established But Max Kaufman published the fundamental work about the Holocaust in Latvia, the 1947 book Hurban Lettland, The Destruction of Jews in Latvia, in Munich, Germany. After that, Max Kaufman and a group of Jewish intellectuals, Holocaust survivors, and the talented organizer Stephen Springfield started our organization in the USA. The main task, as defined then, was to preserve the memory of the Holocaust in Latvia. This continues to be our purpose today. Each year, at the end of November or beginning of December, we conduct a memorial service in memory of the Jews killed in Latvia. This commemorates the two horrible mass murder actions that began in Riga ghetto on November 30 and December 8, 1941. It also coincides with the Shcheda massacre in Liepaja that began 1 week later. Jewish Survivors of Latvia published volumes of remembrances of Holocaust survivors and later began publishing our informative newsletter, The Courier. Also, under the leadership of Stephen Springfield, we provided social, material, and financial assistance to needy Holocaust survivors in Latvia. However, life moves ahead and brings new tasks and goals to our organization. One which we consider most important is to bring factually historical Holocaust history to the wider population of Latvia. The native Latvian population, along with those of other Baltic countries and other territories occupied by the Nazis, were influenced by Goebbels' anti-Semitic propaganda. This propaganda alleged that Jewish Bolsheviks were guilty of Soviet repression and in the 1940 deportation to the Gulag. By repeatedly promoting this lie, the Nazi occupiers found support among the native population, fomenting and expanding gangs of murderers who killed the peaceful Jewish population, gangs which as of the RS commander. During the decade, we have published, supported, and presented numerous historical books, Holocaust survivors' account documents, and films about the Holocaust. These, to a large degree, have educated new generation of Latvians to the crimes and guilt of their fathers and grandfathers in the Holocaust. This manifested in the summer book by Linda Kinsler, Come to This Court and Cry, How the Holocaust Ends. We are grateful to the author of the for bringing to light little-known episodes of the Holocaust and for her deep investigation of extensive Holocaust documents, including editions of our Courier and the book by Ella Medalia, The Right to Live. Though the mass massacres of the Holocaust ended 77 years ago, we are still dealing with its consequences in our eternal memory, in courts, in historical research, conferences, public documents, films, books, and many other forums. But we live in a constantly changing world and must adjust to current realities. We can't reverse and change the past, but we also cannot accept the unconditional hate and vengeance of some Holocaust survivors toward people and the countries that collaborated with the Nazis in the Holocaust machine. Today we are encountering with the third and even fourth generation. It is their fathers and great-grandfathers who participated in killing Jews as members of groups such as RS Commando and local police. We must extend our hand to those who come to us with remorse, expiation, and atonement. Germany is constantly Konrad Adenauer did his and built a bridge when he proposed to Israeli Prime Minister Ben-Gurion that Germany compensate survivors for Nazi crimes. Afterwards, Holocaust survivors and the Jewish state of Israel started receiving funds which in a large degree helped to withstand attacks and wars that sought to end its existence. Also in the past war period, Germany actively engaged in the denazification and re-evaluation of its history and added programs to its schools and teach the evils of the Nazi period. Based on all these issues, the current goals for our organization are the following. First, bring perpetrators to the Holocaust to justice, even posthumously, as in the case of Herbert Zukus. Second, research and investigate Holocaust events, publishing new materials and films. Also republish, promote, and distribute existing fundamental works in Holocaust history. Third, establish cooperation with the leaders of Latvia, with historians and scholars as a research and study of our tragic Holocaust history. Four, continue to convene annual Yizkor gatherings in memory of the Jews murdered in the Holocaust of Latvia. 5. Maintain cooperation with our sister organization in Latvia, Israel, and elsewhere. 6. Attract second, third, and even fourth generation Holocaust survivors to participate in Jewish Survivors Latvia to continue our task and programs. Now returning to activities to the past year. Although our organization is shrinking due to the aging and passing away of first generation Holocaust survivors, it continues to function and remain vibrant. Jewish Survivors of Latvia continue to be active and meet the needs of the times and to look for the future. This year so far we have published 3 issues of the Kuvim. This contained a large amount of essential information about events in Latvia and in the Jewish community, and about the history of Jews from Latvia with a focus on the Holocaust there. We promoted and distributed Max Kaufmann's Urban Letland, Meir Meller's monumental book, Jewish Latvia, Site to Remember, Frida Michelson's I Survived Michelson, Dr. George Schwab, Odyssey of a Child Survivor, has been translated into Russian and will soon appear in Latvia, and Rachel Raya Westerman's My Life Journey. Also, we participated in the preparation and publishing of the book Lipke's List by Riga's Janis Lipke Museum. Among other our related activities, I would like to mention the participation of several our JSL members, people including board members, in the American premiere of Baltic Truth about Holocaust in Latvia, narrated by Israeli famous singer Dudu Fisher, director of the film Eugene Levine. We are deeply thankful to our landsman, Eugene Levine, for his impressive cinema work. In conclusion, I extend my deep gratitude to all of you for participation in today's memorial service in the memory of the Latvian Jews killed during the Holocaust. I hope to welcome you to our future gatherings. I wish you many years of good health, productivity, and happiness in your family. Have a pleasant Thanksgiving and happy Hanukkah. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Professor George Schwab is among the youngest survivors. His physician father, who introduced insulin in Latvia, was murdered in the Holocaust. As a boy, George Schwab spent the war years in the Libau ghetto, Kaiserwald, and Stutthof. Educated in the United States, Europe, and Israel, he received his PhD from Columbia University. He taught at Columbia and at the City University of New York, where he was a respected professor of history and is now Professor Emeritus. Professor Schwab is President Emeritus of the National Committee on American Foreign Policy, and as its president, he traveled the world to promote international peace and understanding. He helped bring Latvia into NATO and was a member of Latvia's Commission of Historians. He received Latvia's highest honor, the Order of the Three Stars. Professor Schwab recently published his captivating memoirs, Odyssey of a Child Survivor, from Latvia through the camps to the United States. And by the way, you don't expect a book by a Holocaust survivor to be a book that you can't put down. It's a book that you can't put down. He is a founding member and vice president of the Jewish Survivors of Latvia. It is my honor to introduce Professor George Schwab, who will say a few words and introduce our guest speaker.
Good day. Before I introduce Mr. Lenski, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Ambassador Pildagovic and the Latvian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for supporting the translation of my memoir into Latvian. Now I'm proceeding to introduce Mr. Lenski. Mr. Ilya Lenski has been an active member of the Latvian Jewish community since the late 1980s. He earned a degree in modern and contemporary history from the University of Latvia, and in 2008, Mr. Lenski began to work at the Museum Jews in Latvia. Since 2008, he has been its director. Between 2014 and 2016, Mr. Lenski also sat on the board of the Latvian Association of Museums. Further, Mr. Lenski's research interests include the modernization of Latvian Jewry in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Haskalah, meaning enlightenment, Latvian Jewish relations, and the history of Holocaust commemoration. Additionally, Mr. Lenski is a member of the advisory board on ethnic minorities of the Latvian Ministry of Culture. He is also a member of the Latvian government delegation to the International Holocaust Organization, which is composed of 35 nations, and a member of the International Holocaust Remember Alliance. Mr. Lenski, the floor is yours.
Dear friends, distinguished guests, dear Ambassador Pildagovic, dear Professor Schwab, dear David, it's really a great honor to speak here, and my colleagues asked me to tell a little bit about probably the most recent development in Latvian Jewish history, so the passing of the bill on goodwill reimbursement, of which which many of you may have heard. So I would gladly do that. But before that, I just wanted to say that probably in this audience, most proper would be to introduce me not with all these titles as a historian on which boards I said, but just as a descendant of Arsh family from Preili and lots of family from Ludza, because probably this is what matters in this audience. And standing here today, I think that if the history would be different, how our average community, how average congregation would look like. People would gather in a beautiful historic building, people of different professions. I can name engineers, doctors, political scientists, singers, chemists, you name it. Most important would be people of different generations, as we've seen today. As we understand, this was destroyed by the Holocaust. Our community is a strong community and flourishing community with its challenges and problems, but of course, it never can be anymore a normal, regular community. Unfortunately, the Holocaust is what is omnipresent in our lives, we could say, and in what we do. And so, in this sense, for me, it is very, very pleasant to be in a normal community. And we constantly hear kids behind the wall. Probably there's a school nearby, and we can remember that in the 60s, when Rumbla Memorial was created, which David was one of the initiators and active participants, one of the texts recited there was the poem by Yiddish poet Meish Teif, Tiefe Grieber, deep pits, and there was the phrase, Welchen Kinder spielen Räuschen bei der Quorum von Kedoschen. Kids will play and make noise at the graves of the martyrs. And this is probably also a strange symbol of future and continuity. We keep our graves, we honor our graves, but we also have this future generation which we beautifully can hear. So I think this brings a lot of optimism. Maybe optimism is not the word that you want to hear at the Holocaust commemorative event, but I think it's maybe the most important word you may hear. I will stop here. I see there is a beamer, so I just wanted to show some of the thesis of my story on the screen, if it's convenient, or I can speak without it, whatever would be more proper.
Well, if they come and put the screen up and say you do, they won't be able to see you because you'll be behind.
Okay, so I'll just speak.
Okay.
So we have to understand several important. Well, after all, I can circulate so whoever wants a presentation to have it handwritten. So we have to understand some very important things concerning this goodwill restitution bill. That it is on one hand part of general trend in many European countries to solve the issues of property owned by the Jews before the Second World War in one way or another. Some countries are presented as an example, some countries are presented as a bad example. So we can say that Latvia is part of this trend, but on the other hand, it's obviously a part of Latvia's inner dialogue within Latvian society of how should we treat our past. And strangely, I would say that this is not only the dialogue about how we should treat the issue of the Holocaust, it's the question of attitude towards the past in general. So we have to understand that before the Second World War, in Latvia, where about 165 Jewish congregations in more than 50 localities. There were hundreds of secular Jewish organizations, educational, cultural, charitable, sports, with a vivid community life. More than 90,000 people. So then comes 1940. Latvia is occupied by the Soviet Union, and Soviet authorities start Sovietizing Latvia. First stage, immediately after occupation, which started on June 17th, 1940, all Jewish public organizations are closed, along with non-Jewish organizations. Then, after August 5th, when Latvia is officially incorporated into Soviet Union, begins also the nationalization of the property, nationalization of the businesses. And obviously it was true for Jews and non-Jews alike. Concerning this clearly Jewish properties, such as synagogues, for example, we know that some of them were nationalized, like, for example, the Great Synagogue of Riga. Some were converted for another use, repurposed, like one of the synagogues in Yakupils, which was given a function of workers' club. So these were things that were pretty regular in the Soviet Union in the preceding 2 decades, but were of course completely new development for Latvia. To be honest, this is a topic which still requires more research, but we know that all of the Jewish buildings were nationalized. Then 1941 comes, Nazi occupation. Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union starts on June 22nd, 1941. In the course of 2 weeks, by July 8th, entire territory of Latvia is under Nazi control. Already in the first days of Nazi occupation started the killings of the Jews. On July 4th alone, it is presumed that 400 to 500 Jews were killed in Riga. Some of them perished in the Great Synagogue and other synagogues that were burned. Others were shot, most probably in Bitemniki forest. And of course, in this context, there was no issue of Jewish property. The only Jewish property that mattered was where the apartments where Jews still lived, and which they were ordered to vacate, either to be moved to the ghettos or to places of concentration, or when they were killed, so these apartments would be transitioned to local authorities, municipalities. The same as movable property would be quite often auctioned off, and there are many witness accounts of how it happened. And in recent years, there is more and more research done on these topics, what happens with the Jewish property. And we have to understand that the story of the Holocaust in Latvia is also very much on the background of this question, how neighbors, how occupational authorities, one authorities, another authorities deal with the Jewish property, be it a dress or be it a grand synagogue building. Because quite often, as we understand, greed would be an important driving force for collaboration. We have to understand that after the Second World War, so when Latvia was under Second Soviet occupation, those Jews who survived, and those were people who survived the Holocaust proper, like Professor Schwab, in ghettos and concentration camps. These were people who were in evacuation in inner regions of Soviet Union, or were fighting in the Soviet army, like David's family and my family. Also, these were people who were deported by the Soviets to Siberia, and who started returning in the late 40s and let's remember there were more than, almost 1,800 Jews who were deported in 1941. So these people try to regain the buildings. And there are a lot of documents how they're asking the authorities, please return us this building or that building, be it in Riga or in the provincial town. And usually authorities would say, there are too few Jews, you don't need them. But for example, the local factory needs housing for its workers, like it happened with the synagogue in Moscow's street in Riga, or a local tractor company needs it for the offices, like it happened with one of the synagogues in Daugavpils. So there are only 8 congregations in Latvia after the Second World War. In Riga there are 2 congregations. One of them is closed by the authorities in 1950 during the major wave of anti-Jewish repressions in the Soviet Union. And after that, of course, nobody discusses the issue of Jewish property. So then comes 1990, when Latvia reestablishes its independence. And so reestablishing of independence was proclaimed on May 4th, 1990, and it was a lasting process of transition to August 1991. We have to understand also that movement for Latvia's independence, which started, let's say, in 1987 and became extremely powerful and visible in summer and particularly autumn 1988, also had some prominent Jewish figures among its leaders. And some of you may remember late Mavericks Wolfsons or Ruta Schatz-Mariesha. So from the very beginning, there was kind of synergy between the re-established Latvian Republic and re-established, revived Jewish community. On September 19th, 1990, yet Supreme Council of Latvian Republic passed a special declaration on condemnation of genocide and anti-Semitism, where it clearly stated, among other things, that also it condemns those Latvians who collaborated with the Nazis and participated in the Holocaust. And so this was kind of the first document laying foundations for the, I don't want to say treatment, but a perception of Jews and Jewish history by Latvian state. Very early, 3 months after the independence was reestablished, when yet you still have Soviet tanks in Latvia. So then when Latvia's independence is fully reestablished, 1991, after that, a set of laws is passed on restitution of the property. And here it is very important to understand that Latvia sees itself as a continuously existing state since proclamation of independence in 1918. We're not speaking about First Republic or Second Republic. There is only one Republic of Latvia. We are the same state that has been established 104 years ago. We celebrated the anniversary just 3 days ago, November 18th. And so restoring the property rights, the ownership rights, was seen as kind of inseparable part of this process of returning to normality. If we see the Nazi and Soviet periods of occupation as a period not only of crime, obviously, but also of kind of legal abnormality, when the normal laws of how any normal society works were not implemented. So it was very important for newly revived state to pass the laws on restitution of property. And so laws were very liberal. Whoever wanted could apply for the restoration of rights to property owned by his family. Also, what's important, there was a separate law on how the property that was owned by religious organizations can be restituted. And this law, of course, was designed mostly keeping in mind Christian denominations, as they're the majority in Latvia. So before the Second World War, the Jews were about 5% of the population. They were the only non-Christian denomination. And what's important, they were the only denomination which did not have a central body. Not only because it's hard to bring all the Jews under one umbrella, as many of us may know, but also because there were several attempts, but they failed, and still by late 30s, Latvian Jews were on the way of creating kind of central institution. But as we know, Judaism does not require any sort of central body, nor the Pope, nor the Synod, nor the Consistoire, nothing. So there was problems with the parts of the law which said that the property, if there is no congregation in certain locality, the property should be returned to the central body. For the Jewish community, it was very important that we didn't want to establish fake congregations in order to regain property. Yeah, like registering a Jewish community in Dagda, where before the war you would have 500 Jews, 3 synagogues, and obviously in 1990s you didn't have a single Jew there. So we went another way. All in all, 35 objects have been returned to the Jewish community in the course of 1990s. There were also some rejections, and sometimes on a very interesting basis. For example, the building of Hebra Kadisha, the burial fraternity of Liepāja, was not returned, saying that it did not have religious component in it. Although the law did not, of course, require that the building itself is used for any religious purposes, the law wasn't returning the property of religious organizations. And of course, many religious denominations returned buildings or plots of land that belonged to them. Actually, one of the biggest landowners in Riga is the Old Believers congregation, which owns the land under huge residential neighborhoods, Ravniek and Purcēms. So, but of course, the idea that burial fraternity is something that has no religious function or no religious component is ironic per se. So by late 90s, early 2000s, 35 objects were restituted. In 2002 was created Latvian Council of Jewish Communities as an umbrella organization uniting both secular and religious institutions. And it put as its one of the goals to finalize the restitution process. So the struggle took 20 years. The law was drafted, the first law that would settle this issue. And the list of the properties the Jewish community claimed was 280 buildings. So the law was drafted in 2006. Since then, several times it was sent to Parliament, the governments, changing governments. As Latvia is a democratic country, which quite often has new governments even between the elections. So the governments would promise that this law should pass, but the Parliament would fail it. And so it became sort of hot potato, because many political forces felt it very convenient to manipulate with this issue. Because, first of all, the word Jews is a buzzword for the voter public. And of course, the word property is also a buzzword. So if you put these two things together, it's just match made in heaven for the clickbait slogans in the news, whatever the content is. And sometimes you could encounter that when you guided tours through small Latvian towns back in the 2000s, people would be looking at you suspiciously because they were afraid that finally the Jews came to grab their property, whatever it means. So it was kind of a more social phenomenon than a legal phenomenon. What is important in 2010, the law was passed in Lithuania, very much based on the law that Latvia developed. So this law was implemented in Lithuania. And the sky didn't fall on earth. So this was an important thing, showing that we are on the right way. What was the idea of the law? If initially the Jewish community was asking for the property to be returned, for the restitution in the very sense of the word, because these were buildings which were built for the Jewish functions, or were acquired by the Jewish community to fulfill certain functions, or just to generate income to sustain the community. Then the government proposed and the Jewish community agreed that rather the property should be reimbursed, because many of the buildings have changed hands, so they were sold to private owners. Other buildings hosted important institutions like hospitals or universities, and forcing them out of there would be too complicated. So the government proposed that all the buildings are reimbursed. So the reimbursement of cadastral value was agreed on, and you can imagine that the cadastral value is much lower than the commercial value, but the Jewish community agreed to that. So still this game of ping pong continued. The Jewish community would be submitting the law. The law would be rejected in one stage or another. In 2019, government coalition party, not the state party, Liberal Party, decided to be kind of a promoter of this law in the parliament, but also they did not succeed, so still it did not get the majority of the votes, although the good thing that it was already seriously discussed in the parliament. It's important to understand that the Jewish community would be working with all political parties. We would go addressing anybody who would be ready to listen to us and to explain our points to all the political parties. It was not that we would be only addressing liberals or only addressing the conservatives. No, we were addressing all the political parties, and also we, in recent years, became active in addressing Latvian society. Because many politicians would say, well, you know, I personally would vote for it, but my voters would not understand me. Our society is not ready. And after all, we have now an election period. Elections are upcoming, so I cannot risk my position as a member of parliament advocating for this so, you know, so specific, so problematic law. And as you understand, the election period starts the next day after elections. So that it's a long run of 4 years. So it was kind of a never-ending story. And for us, it was very important to speak also to the society. So the politicians cannot claim that it's a society that prevents the law from being passed. And actually, last polls, which were conducted in 2018 and 2019, showed that more than half of Latvia's, or about half of Latvia's population, is in favor of passing this law. So it was an important change. It would not say that Latvian society is against this law. No, Latvian society was maybe equally split, as it is split on many other issues. And let's be honest, quite often this does not prevent politicians from passing the laws that are controversial. So it was important that society, you would see growing support in the society for this law to be passed. And also more and more public intellectuals, historians, and from artistic world, they would be speaking in favor of this law. It is important that we do not ask anybody to write an article why I support the law of restitution for the Jewish community. It would be just something that would appear on its own in their talks. So this is something that they saw as an important part of how Latvia deals with its past. And none of these Latvian public intellectuals were Jewish. Many of them were accused of getting Jewish money. Let me say that it was not true. They received a lot of Jewish gratitudes, but not a single Jewish penny. So by 2019, situation started changing. And for us it was very important, of course, also the support of our international partners. As we're in the US, we can start with American Jewish Community and US Department of State and World Jewish Restitution Organization, and also European Parliament and many, many other organizations. And probably it was very much an argument for politicians that this question arises also internationally. We as the Jewish community, and also personally I, as a member of the Latvian delegation to International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, constantly had to answer the question, well, you are not passing this bill because Latvian society is anti-Semitic. And I was trying to explain, no, it's not because Latvian society is anti-Semitic, but it's because politicians do not have enough will to do that. Our politicians, maybe they were afraid or whatever. So we constantly, ironically, had to explain that Latvia is maybe one of the safest countries for the Jews, was one of the maybe lowest levels of anti-Semitism in Latvia, and still Latvia has not passed that law. So the fact that this was an international issue probably also played its role. And unfortunately, we have to say, as the current Russia's war against Ukraine was bulging in last year, and more people obviously saw Latvia endangered. Probably more and more people started believing that Jews are manipulating American Department of State, and we would explicitly hear politicians on TV shows say, okay, if the restitution law is the price Americans want us to pay for them, for NATO to defend us, let's do that. It's not very different from belief of Nazis that Roosevelt really was Rosenfeld, and that the Jews were behind America's efforts in the Second World War. So ironically, this anti-Semitic myth or anti-Semitic trope maybe did some good, at least among politicians. But for us it was important that there were several political parties across the spectrum, liberals and conservatives and left-wing parties, that were advocating the passing of this law, and advocated saying that let's turn this page over. This has been a hot potato for 20 years. Let's throw this hot potato into the trash bin. The most proper way to deal with it. So let's just solve this issue, and that's it. And next morning we wake up without this burden, without this program. What was also important is that many people who were advocating for the law actually came from the economic circles, and they were trying to explain to the society that although the number 40 million euros sounds very big, but actually it's 40 million in the course of 10 years. So annual allotments of 4 million, even for a country like Latvia, it's doable. Yeah, so it would not take away hundreds of kindergartens not being built, or hospitals, or whatever. So this was also important, that there was support across the spectrum from different sections of Latvian society for this law to be passed. And finally, on February 10th, going through 3 readings in the Parliament, when some amendments were done, the the law was passed, and on 21st of February, the law was signed by the president. So since March 7th, this law is irreversible, I would say. What this law proposes, first of all, we have to understand that this law is called the law of goodwill reimbursement to the Jewish community. It emphasizes that it is not it's not mandatory for the state of Latvia to restitute anything, but it is the goodwill and that it's the wish of Latvia to repair some damage done to the Jewish community during the Nazi and Soviet occupation. And the wording of the law, and this was developed by us, by the Jewish community, explicitly said that there is no guilt of Latvian state or Latvians for the fact that the property was confiscated, and that the property ended up in the hands of Latvia, and that's why we are dealing with Latvia and asking Latvia to solve some of this issue. Also, it was important that we, as the Jewish community, tried to explain what quite often we're accused of, that this law is Holocaust industry, if you know this word, and that it's kind of making money on blood, that the Jewish community demands compensation for the suffering during the Holocaust. So we tried to explain that, no, this has nothing to do with the suffering during the Holocaust. This has to do only with the issue of property. The issues of suffering, for example, Holocaust survivors, they receive certain allocations both by German government, in the claims conference, and Latvia has the special status of victim of political repressions. Yes, in this sense, they receive what the state of Latvia can give to them. But what's important, this law is not about guilt or responsibility or whatever. This is not the law about Holocaust. This law became the part of the debate about Holocaust in Latvian society. But this is law not about the Holocaust. The Holocaust is the reason why this law had to be passed, because most of the Jewish communities were destroyed, were unable to restitute and to restore its former status and its former glory. But it's not the law about the Holocaust. So framing it only in the Holocaust would be a little bit of an exaggeration. And so we specifically, that's why we used the word reimbursement, because the word compensation, which quite often would be used, it kind of implies guilt. We were trying to explain to the audience, guys, nobody's accusing anybody of anything. We're discussing properties, buildings, lots of land. Then, something very important is that this money goes to special foundation. Many people, both anti-Semites and Jews alike, thought that really money would be distributed to Jews, which would form probably a big queue, and would receive, like an anti-Semitic caricature, packages of money. No, that's not happening. Basically, the law states that the money can be allocated for the cultural, educational, and charitable purposes. It indeed includes support for Holocaust survivors, and supporting Holocaust survivors from Latvia who live abroad is the only case when this money can be used outside of Latvia. So it was very important for us that this money stays in Latvia and works for Latvia. So all the money is allocated to Latvian Jewish Community Restitution Fund, which develops, well, actually has already developed the statutes and system of grants to which anybody can apply. And for us, it is very important. This money probably mostly will be received by non-Jewish organizations, at least in the field relating to history, to memory, today in Latvia, mostly these are non-Jews, local historians, people from museums, people from libraries who deal with Jewish history of their native towns, with Holocaust memory. There is a beautiful movie by Boris Mavcer called The Drawers of Memory, where he goes and interviews many of these people. So this is something very important for us. From this money will benefit not only, unfortunately, not so numerous Jewish community of Latvia. From it will benefit entire Latvia as a nation. Then, what is also very important for us, and what are our as the Jewish community plans. So, half of the money every year is disbursed as these grants, and the Jewish community institutions, along with other institutions, have to apply for grants. It's not that they have the privilege of receiving this money, definitely not. And then half is saved for future. Something very important for us. Why this bill was so important for us? It secures Latvia's Jewish community future. Not anymore. Jewish community would be so heavily dependent on a few wealthy donors. May they live and prosper for many, many years. But it was, of course, for us important that the community has the root of its sustainability within itself, not in wealthy members of the board or international charitable organizations. So with this bill, which came to be thanks to many parties involved, including some of the people present here, and Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Latvia also contributed to that. I don't know to what extent this information can be made public, but also Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed its view that it would be good for Latvia's image to pass this law. So thanks to all of you, very much would say that the future of Latvia's Jewish community is secure. I say it responsibly. Here we are back at the optimism. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ilya, for enlightening us both about the Jewish community and also about the very long journey of restitution, the goodwill law that finally came to pass this year, and that this organization and so many others have been involved in for so long. His Excellency Andres Bildigovich is Latvia's ambassador to the United Nations. Previously, he was Latvia's Secretary for Foreign Affairs. He has also served as ambassador to the United States and Chief of Staff of the Chancery of the President of Latvia. Ambassador Bildigovich pursued the Foreign Service Program at Oxford University, studied Chinese at the Beijing Foreign Languages Institute, and graduated from the Faculty of Oriental Studies of St. Petersburg State University. It is my great honor and privilege to introduce Ambassador Andrei Bildigovich.
Honorable President David Zuberman, Honorable Professor Schwab, Honorable Ivars Brods, all members of the Latvian American community, survivors of the Holocaust in Latvia. For me and for my family, my wife, my daughter is with me, as well as our intern from the Latvian mission here in New York at the United Nations, Julia Bonder, is here as well. It's an honor and privilege to attend this annual event. And I want also to thank Mr. Lenskis for this remarkable narrative of the transformation of Latvia from a former captive nation occupied by the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany into becoming a mainstream European democracy over the last 32 years. And of course, our story of change has involved all members of the Latvian population, of the Latvian society. And you and descendants of the Latvian Jews living abroad have also contributed immensely to this remarkable change. This journey has been long, it has been quite bumpy a few times, but I think we have succeeded together, working as a democratic, as a pluralistic, as a legal country, developing and fine-tuning our democracy, learning from the mistakes of the past, uncovering many, many dark and many, many bloody pages in our history. But this journey has been successful, and I'm quite pleased that over the last 12 months since our last year's meeting, we have achieved important milestones. The law, which was described so eloquently by Ilya, is a very, very important step. It's not the first step, it's probably not the last one, but it was certainly one of the highlights. And I also want to use this occasion to thank everyone who has been keeping contacts alive with Latvia over the last 12 months. Together with Ilya, we attended a remarkable reunion of the former and current Libauers, Jews coming from Liepāja, from Kurzeme. We have been working on a number of publications, including the translation of Professor Schwab's book, Diary in Latvian. I hope that it will be published next year. And many, many good things have happened also in relationship between Latvia and the United States, Latvia and Israel. Just in a few days, the President of Latvia will pay a state visit to Israel, which will be another important page in our relationships. So the trust has been building up. Our relations with Israel are very, very vibrant and strong also in the United Nations. We work together on many, many contemporary challenges, including fight against anti-Semitism in all spaces, including digital ones. But I hope you will forgive me if I will spend a few minutes about the big black cloud which is hanging over us during this year's annual commemorative event. We commemorate the Holocaust, the unique event in the history of the mankind when threatened with complete annihilation. That's the ultimate evil which has existed so far in the human history. That has to be remembered, thought, and passed forward to the next generations. But speaking about the contemporary developments, I think we should reflect also a bit on the war which is ravaging Europe. I had hoped that my generation would be spared from seeing war that close to the borders of Latvia. Regrettably, that hasn't happened. Since February 24th, we are living in a new reality. We are seeing the largest humanitarian catastrophe in Europe since World War II, when Russia implemented deliberate, premeditated, illegal war of aggression for the the second time since World War II, we see the most heinous crime, the mother crime, as we say, in international law, the war of aggression, which is aimed at annihilation of an entire country, of Ukraine. The reason for that is denazification of the country of Ukraine of 40 million people. The reason of this war is justified by anti-Semitic assaults on the president of the country, President Zelensky, anti-Semitic assaults by Foreign Minister Lavrov, and over 9 months, long 9 months, we will soon mark the first anniversary of this war. We have seen massive destruction. 17 million people have been displaced. 7 million are in exodus. 40,000 Ukrainians have moved to Latvia. Latvia, for the first time since World War II, we are seeing such massive wave of displaced people. People, mostly women and children. 62 Ukrainian newborn babies have arrived in the Riga city hospital. Just a few examples. And as we talk today, more than 4 million Ukrainians live without heating, without water, without sanitation, without internet. And this madness is still taking place. I would not dwell too long, but I just want to reflect on that we are learning from the crimes committed during World War II against the Jews. And I don't want to make any parallels. Holocaust is unique, but I certainly relate in the sense of solidarity with the people of Ukraine, of all ethnic backgrounds, including Jews, of course, of Ukraine, who are suffering as well. And I want to share with you that Latvia is not complacent. We have provided 1% of our GDP to Ukraine. Hundreds of millions of euros or dollars have been offered to the people of Ukraine. We have offered 40% of our military capacity to Ukraine, even before aggression, because we knew that it was coming. We knew that we cannot trust those lies about military maneuvers. We knew that we had to provide the missiles to Ukrainian armed forces, and actually our missiles have been used for the protection of Kiev in March of this year. And we very much think that all people who believe in freedom, who believe in humanity, who believe in solidarity, rule of law, should lend supporting hand to the people of Ukraine. This war is not one of 30 conflicts around the world. Of course, we have to do utmost to contain other military conflicts, be it in Yemen or in Iraq or in Myanmar. But this war is very, very different. President Putin wants to change the foundations of the international law since the end of the Second World War and since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And we have to be crystal clear that he wants to resume spheres of influence. He is using hate speech as his new ideology against the neighboring states, against the neighboring nations. He is dehumanizing Ukrainians, basically saying that they don't have their own language, they don't have their own history, they don't have their own culture. Ideas which to many of us are too familiar with the ideas which have been used in the 30s by Adolf Hitler. So we urge everyone to support Ukrainians. I don't have a crystal ball, I don't know how long this massacre will last, but we see every day massive destruction, the electrification of Ukraine, assaults on critical infrastructure, and we believe that Ukraine has to be supported in every way. Humanitarian, political, military, and of course US leadership in this regard is very important. So I would like to invite you to do utmost what is possible in this regard. Simply saying if Putin stops this war, the bloodshed would be stopped. If Ukrainians will stop fighting, Ukraine will disappear. And if Ukraine will disappear, then this ideology of hatred will prevail, and Putin's Russia will go on with plans for new breathing space, for new territories, for new aggressions. Latvia is in this regard has a very strong position. We believe that this aggression should be stopped, and the persecutors and the perpetrators of this aggression should be brought to justice. We advocate at the UN that we have to have a special tribunal on the crime of aggression. ICC, International Criminal Court, will deal with the specific war crimes committed by the Russian soldiers, be it rapes, be it shelling of the residential areas, etc. But until and unless we have a special tribunal on the highest leadership of Russia, nobody in Europe will be safe. And this aggression will be an invitation for the future crimes. So those who have read Dostoevsky know very well. So where there is a crime, there is punishment, and hopefully, one day Russian people will wake up and will be remorse, atonement, etc. Everything what is needed in this regard. So thank you so much for this invitation. Sorry for bringing extra gloom on this pretty dark day of commemoration, but I very much hope that together we will prevail, we will persevere, and we will build on our friendship, partnership, and common rules. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Vildagovich, for being a part of this gathering and for bringing your perspective from both Latvia and the Foreign Service to our meeting today. Charles Springfield, MD, is the son of our late President Stephen Springfield and Rita Springfield. Charles grew up in New York and attended New York Medical College. He practiced emergency medicine for many years in Redding, California, and later moved to Florida, where he is also an emergency room physician. This mic just a little bit. In addition, he has published articles in prestigious medical journals. Charles has been a longtime member of the Jewish Survivors of Latvia, participating in many of its activities and giving most generously to its programs. Charles has been to Latvia at least 6 times to participate in international reunions, to further the organization's interests, and to assist his late father. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Charles Springfield.
Thank you for the honor of letting me address this group. Most of you knew my father. When he came to the United States after World War II and living in Berlin for a while in the United States, he was busy building a family and surviving. Our family grew. He started a business with his brother Peter, and it was during those times of his work in the retail business that Max Kaufman would come into his store in Washington Heights, and I would hear, as I would help my father during the Christmas season and the holidays in his business, the constant referral by Mr. Kaufman that something had to be done to make a memory of what had happened to the Jewish survivors, the Jewish people in Latvia. When he finally retired, he dedicated the rest of his life to helping to create this organization, along with his brother, with Dr. Schwab, Dr. Schneider, Jack Ratz, Leo Cram, and they worked tirelessly. In 1989, when Latvia was kind of liberated by Gorbachev, he immediately went back with his brother Peter to look for family members that were still there and to assess the situation of the Jewish community in Latvia. He was stunned and sorrowed and started the constant drumbeat of coming back to Latvia, helping the surviving Jewish community, to help with Bikor Cholim Hospital, to support the elderly population with food kitchen and vacations. And then he, with Dr. Schwab and the rest of the leaders of this organization, worked with the government of the United States, and particularly the government of Latvia, President Freiberg, to try and address the educational issues that he found very concerning in terms of what they were teaching the children in school, to have memorials at both the synagogue, Rumbala and Bikernik, and bringing the Jewish students, the Kinnor Choir, to the United States so they could see, people around the world could see that the community was still alive and could be rebuilt and flourish. The last 25 years of his life, this organization was his life. And it's always an honor for me to come, because as I was in Latvia and watched what he and George and other people accomplished there, peacefully, encouraging, working with President Freiberg and the rest of the political body there, it's just so wonderful to see that we're still here, that hopefully the more of the second generation and third and fourth generation will continue to support this organization as we try to improve the state of our people in Latvia and hope for a brighter future. Thank you for the honor of letting me speak.
Thank you, Charles. Jewish Survivors of Latvia board member Elida Pietenghoff-Nehausen was born in Riga and came to New York in 1972. She is a second-generation Holocaust survivor who has dedicated her life on stage to preserving Jewish history and traditions. She emphasizes the importance of passing the torch from generation to generation. If we forget the past, we have no future. Throughout her career, Elida has raised over $7.5 million for the state of Israel, from Mogen David Adom ambulances to the IDF, Hadassah Hospital, kindergartens in Sderot, Ort, and Hadassah organizations, to name a few. Elida is an international recording artist with 9 albums who has graced the world singing in 16 languages. I have trouble enough with English. Alita is recognized among the 100 Golden Voices of History by Euronews. Through the pandemic, Alita gave numerous concerts on Zoom for Holocaust survivors in the U.S., Israel, and Latvia. Alita is a dedicated and tireless member of the board with an abundance of energy and commitment to the future of Jewish survivors of Latvia that has to be truly commended. Alita Nahas.
Good afternoon. I'm humbled and privileged to stand here before you as we remember millions of Jewish people, innocent souls, that were taken away for just one reason, for being Jewish. We remember all those on whose shoulders we stand today. This link of passing the torch of generations to generations can never be broken. If we forget the past, we have no future. And today, more than ever, we encourage everyone to instill that in their children and grandchildren. Every breath we take, every sunrise and sunset we admire, our children's laughter and their footsteps, we owe to those before us, our family, who by sheer luck and perseverance survived for us to be born. Our family lost 40 members in Holocaust in Latvia, including my grandparents Moses and Luba Fittingov, who were deaf and mute. My parents, Benno and Fanny Fittingov, miraculously survived to give me life. God gave me voice. Their spirit lives on in me. And my calling in life is to keep their legacy and all those brutally killed alive. Never again. Honoring memories of the Holocaust has become a family tradition. Our daughter Rafaela Nehausen produced a moving 2019-17 Oscar-nominated documentary, Joe's Violin, about a 94-year-old Holocaust survivor, Joseph Feingold. For almost 10 years, we have attended Jewish Survivors of Latvia memorial services with the entire family, all 3 generations of Nehausen Fittingov family. No matter where in the world or what language I am singing in, I always include a song in Yiddish to tell my story whenever it happens in Japan, Argentina, Israel, Latvia, South Korea. Charity has become a way of life for me, where I lend my talent, my heart, and my soul to worthy causes, like Miami Organ Transplant Institution, Veterans Club, so many different organizations, but nowhere I feel my total dedication than Jewish Survivors of Latvia. And the older we get, the more urge it is to do more, to come here, to reach out, to bring people of my generation, their children, grandchildren. I want my grandchildren to know grandchildren of George Schwab and David Silberman. So this is the future, the link. It is my honor to be a part of the executive board of Jewish Survivors of Latvia, following in footsteps of such remarkable, strong women like Luba Ruckman and Gertha Fagan, who were at the very beginning of this organization. I am deeply inspired by our esteemed colleagues, Professor George Schwab, David Silberman, together with our dedicated board of directors. But we cannot do it alone. We need to grow. We need to bring new members of board of our organization. Without your participation, we are doomed. This is the vital goal of Jewish Survivors of Latvia today. And if it's not now, then when? We have big plans for future development and international visibility of Jewish Survivors of Latvia. My daughter Rafaela is a former management consultant, gave me 5 pages of very, very interesting and doable plan. create, first of all, proper data of membership and strategies for communication, revamp a website, an easy way to sign in and donate, to have a page on Facebook where we inform about our upcoming events. Actually, as I stand here, this event is being live streamed, and dozens and dozens of our friends from Riga in Israel are watching it, in Latvia and all over the world. We make sure that that's known. Education resources, to name a few. We would like to build open lines of communication with second and third generation of Holocaust survivors. This multi-generational link can never be broken. And we're asking you today, if you haven't registered yet, please make sure that we have your whereabouts. And now something that I would like to share with you on a personal observation. And I will speak with the heart. What really inspires me on a daily basis? And this is having Professor Joshua book on my native. The book Odyssey of a Child Survivor from Latvia through the camps to the United States was published last year to rave reviews. And today, as I see George Schwab's family and his 3 glorious grandsons, that really warms my heart. I can't help but to feel, as I look at my 11 now 12 George Schwab had to endure back during the onset of World War II and the Holocaust in Latvia. How could such a young child survive, persevere, and maintain hope? As someone who was born in Latvia in the 50s, in the seemingly peaceful period following the war, reading this book was a life-changing experience. Honestly, I simply could not put the book down. Emotions were overflowing, taking over in the most unexplainable ways, from joy to sadness, from wonder to heartache. Many times I had to hold back tears. The affection with which George Schwab endearingly calls his parents Papinka and Maminka was reminiscent of what I called my own parents, Papulinka and Mamulinka. This book must be read by everyone who holds dear the memory of departed loved ones, on whose shoulders we stand today. For me personally, it has become my quest to pass the torch of our shared Jewish history from generation to generation. These stories must be taught in school, so that such crimes against humanity will never repeat themselves. This book is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of perseverance. Even more impressively, it's the story of a man who was able to rebuild his life with joy, humor, and warmth in a new country, and was not left embittered by his past. These elegant memoirs will leave you inspired and full of hope for what's possible when one does not give up. Thank you for your time.
I have to give you this.
And I have to give you the biggest hug. You are my hero. You are my hero. And your birthday is coming up. When is your birthday?
Next week.
Next week. So we
I'll
are
be
stuck.
91. You've lost LG.
Oh, listen. Age is a number. Yours is unlisted. You're our beacon. Thank you so much.
David? David?
Okay.
David?
is a producer and director of the Rumbola Echa and the documentary film and the TV mini-series. It is first focused on the massacre of the 25,000 at Rumbola, the first to